Okay, so just in the interest of everyone's time, we'll start the event. So first of all, good morning. My name is John Mars, and I'm the Regional Director for the Department for International Trade for South Central US, covering the states of Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, Arkansas, and Louisiana. Firstly, thank you to everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today at our Doing Business Abroad series. The UK's Department for International Trade presents today's webinar in partnership with the Oklahoma Chamber of Commerce's Aerospace Division. Today's event will focus on the aerospace sector, both here in Oklahoma and in the UK. And in the audience, we have members of the aerospace community from both sides of the Atlantic. And I'm honoured to have three guest speakers presenting today. We have the UK's Deputy HM Trade Commissioner for the US, State Director of Aerospace and Defence at the Oklahoma Department of Commerce, and an aerospace specialist from the UK's Department for International Trade. During our session, we'll be introducing the services of the Department for International Trade, demonstrating the commercial value of a robust bilateral trade agreement for US and UK aerospace companies, and an overview of the aerospace industry and opportunities in Oklahoma and in the UK. My colleague, Sarah Banks, our Trade and Investment Officer for Aerospace in the region, will be moderating questions towards the end of the presentation, so please feel free to add any you may have to the chat bar function. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first guest speaker. Kunal Khatri is the UK's Deputy HM Trade Commissioner for the USA, based at the British Consulate in New York City. He leads the US team to deliver new trade and investment opportunities across all economic sectors. Prior to joining the US network last year, Kunal spent 5 years at the British Embassy in Beijing as the UK's Minister, Counselor and Director for Financial and Professional Services. Kunal also worked at the World Bank, United Nations and The Economist newspaper. Over to you, Kunal.
Great, thank you very much, John, and thank you all for pulling together today's event and webinar. And for those virtual attendees, I'm delighted to meet you, albeit virtually as well. So I'm going to just have a few short opening remarks, just talking about UK-US relationship, Oklahoma relationship, and obviously aerospace as well. So, you know, it goes without saying the US is our most important trade and investment partner. Looking at all goods and services, the US is the UK's largest export market. The US is also the largest investor into the UK. Around 25% of the stock and investment in the UK comes from the US. So this is just a critical foundation, a critical relationship. And now that we have left the EU following Brexit, is a relationship that we are very keen to double down on and grow. One of the key planks of that is obviously our ongoing negotiations on a free trade agreement. We made very good progress under the previous administration, and we're in a bit of a holding pattern whilst we wait for the new USTR, Catherine Tide, to be confirmed, get her feet under the table and set her agenda and priorities. But aside from the FTA, there is a lot that we can still do and that we really want to do to deepen the bilateral trade investment relationship. And that includes here, obviously virtually here in Oklahoma. And looking through the stats on the UK relationship with Oklahoma, there are around 10,000 Oklahomans who are employed by UK firms and their subsidiaries. You know, some of the largest ones are BAE Systems, Crown Plaza, Intertech. And the value of goods and services trade, Oklahoma to the UK, so Oklahoma exports to the UK total around 500 million. And that is actually a few years old, and I expect it has grown over time as well. Looking more broadly for the US and the UK, and in the aerospace sector as well, around 70% of UK aerospace firms are already importing or exporting with US partners. And it's a very similar stat when we look at US firms as well, in terms of where are they trading. 3/4 or so are already trading with the UK. And that's something that we want to build on even further. The aerospace industry is obviously going through a very tough time. It's been a very tough year, and the bulk orders of planes have obviously dropped, and we are hoping that we can escape the throes of the pandemic towards the middle and end of this year. Reading most economists' forecasts, there will be quite an unleash and bounce back in consumer spending and travel, and that can only bode well for the aerospace industry as a whole. The industry is critical to the UK, and it is one that we are consistently supporting through the pandemic. There are around 250 to 300,000 people employed in the UK as a result of the aerospace industry. That's directly employed. So actually, you look at supply chains, there are hundreds of thousands more that feed into that as well. And our industry is the third largest globally, the largest in the EU, accounting for around £12 billion. Aside from the pandemic, one of the other challenges and trends that we have to deal with is the transition to net zero. And how do we tackle across all industries, including aerospace, the contribution to climate change? This year, in November, the UK is hosting COP26. We are presidents of the UN Climate Change Convention, and it will be a key moment for garnering commitments from countries, but also businesses, to transition to net zero. The UK is the first country in the world to have established a net zero target by 2050. And we're already hearing more from other countries and businesses in this space, including in the US. In the aerospace industry itself, the Prime Minister in December announced his 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution. Point 6 was all around the aerospace industry and how do we transition to net zero in this space. We've established a Jet Zero Council, which aims to achieve zero emissions flights by 2050. And there's money behind this as well. So 15 million has been invested through Fly Zero and the Aerospace Technology Institute with the aim of achieving zero emissions flight by 2050. There are the green shoots of success. And towards the end of last year, company Zero Avia took off from Cranfield and achieved a hydrogen fuel cell flight. So the taxi, takeoff, full pattern circuit, and landing as well, which is a great signal of what's more to come in this space. I've been here coming up to 6 months now, and I've already had a few conversations with very innovative firms in this space, leading the way on net zero flight, and also the supply chain that is adapting to feed into that as well. So it's a very exciting area, despite the struggles and challenges of the last year and the pandemic. So look, just to cap off, I'm very happy to join today's seminar. I'm in very much a learning and listening mode myself, and I hope that you find this fruitful. And needless to say, following on from the seminar, please do reach out to myself, Jonathan Mars, Sarah Banks, Department of Trade in the UK. We're here to facilitate and support any of your needs, any of your interests in the UK, partnerships with UK firms, investment in the UK, or equally supply chain from the UK. We bring delegations to the US all the time, and we are here to connect you with interested parties. So with that, thank you very much. Jonathan, back to you.
Thank you, Kunal. Jeff Camp is the State Director for Aerospace and Defense for the Oklahoma Department of Commerce. He's a graduate of the Oklahoma State University Aviation program, where he received a Bachelor's of Science in Aviation Science with an emphasis in technical services and management. Jeff started his 28-year career in aviation in 1993 and has worked as a jet engine mechanic, a jet engine test technician, and an engineering test manager. In 2017, Jeff took over as Senior Executive for Business Development for Vertical Aerospace in Bristol, Oklahoma. Over to you, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I appreciate it. Good morning and welcome, everybody. If you'll allow me one moment, I will share my screen and I will get started on my presentation. Today, I would like to talk to you a little bit about where Oklahoma is and where we are going as a state in terms of aerospace and defense industry. Can everybody see that okay? I think I'll get a positive, just wait for a second, I think it catches on here. So I would like to, first of all, thank you, Kunal, for those remarks. I absolutely agree. Aerospace and defense, third largest in the nation, or in the globe. It is the second largest industry in the state of Oklahoma. That is by design and purpose, of which I'll alliterate a little bit more in just a second. So as Jonathan said, my name is Jeff Camp. I'm the State Director of Aerospace and Defense for the state of Oklahoma. I am a purpose-built position. Myself and my team are legislatively mandated and funded to operate within the state of Oklahoma with the sole purpose of growing and caring for the aerospace and defense industry. We do that through outreach, constant contact with our constituent companies, ensuring that they have everything they need in terms of supply chain, access to legislation, access to opportunities, access to state leadership. Oklahoma is unique in the fact that we have a very flat leadership structure. So that allows a large degree of freedom for businesses to operate and be successful. I will say one thing that I believe that the state has handled very well. Our economy bounced back very quickly from the initial lockdown from the pandemic. We opened up rather timidly, and then quickly thereafter, and our economy has made huge strides in the state of Oklahoma because we opened up for business. In terms of states across the country, Oklahoma is a very free state. It is a very low-cost state. So I'll just take my word for it. Let's get into some numbers, shall we? So we are centrally located in the continent. We have access to 88 million people across within a 500-mile radius. We've got 135 public use airports. As I stated, centrally located. 4 inland ports. Of note, we have the most northern, most inland ice-free port in the country, direct access to the Gulf of Mexico and shipping lanes. There is a Coast Guard detachment there. I know that sounds a little odd, maybe. The Coast Guard is stationed in Oklahoma, but we do have Coast Guard here. 3 intersecting major interstates. That's a huge advantage in terms of logistics, whether you're in the logistics industry or you need logistics to supply your business. In terms of economic impact, as I stated earlier, it is the second largest industry in the state of Oklahoma. It is second only to the energy industry. The last time we measured it was in 2017. At that time, the energy industry was roughly about a $61 billion impact. Aerospace and defense accounted for $44 billion. At this point, we now have over 200,000 employees in the industry, which equates to a little bit about 17% of Oklahomans. We have over 1,100 entities within the state, either on airport, off airport, serving in a defense capacity, aerospace capacity, a research capacity, commercial space, all of those things. We have a very rich and diverse aerospace industry in this state, and it's very geographically spread with a couple of centers of excellence, so to speak. Here are our workforce assets. If you talk to anybody in economic development, they'll tell you that economic development is workforce development, and that's very true. So in terms of our workforce assets, like I said, about 7.5% of the state's economy. You can see the clusters within the state right here in the center, the square dark blue county, that's Oklahoma County. That encompasses the Oklahoma City Metro Service area. And then this other dark blue county up to the northeast of Oklahoma City, that is the Tulsa Metro Service area. We have well over 35,000 employees in both of those counties. Of interest, the other dark lighter shade blue, just slightly lighter than the dark blue, those are where some military bases or university research centers are located. I'll get into that in just a minute. So as far as workforce assets are concerned, we have made great strides and done a lot of heavy lifting work to grow our engineering workforce in terms of aerospace engineering, mechanical engineering, and supporting engineering and degrees, technical degrees such as myself, to support the aerospace and defense industry. That work is now bearing fruit, as you can see. Since 2014, there's been an 86% increase in engineering graduates. We have 9 higher ed facilities within the state that offer bachelor's or graduate or undergraduate or graduate level degrees. In 2017, Oklahoma County, that square dark blue county in the middle of Oklahoma, awarded the most aeronautical and aerospace engineering degrees in the nation. That's the latest data we have is 2017. It hasn't been measured again. We've managed to graduate over 4,300 engineers or related aerospace degrees last year, 2019 to 2020. So our workforce is competent and growing rapidly. The thing we like to say around here in Oklahoma is aerospace and defense is the hottest thing. And it truly is. There's a buzz within the state, a regenerated sense of purpose, I should say. Many people are joining the workforce, the aerospace workforce, and are excited about its future. In terms of supply chain, Oklahoma's supply chain is very vast and diverse, much like our aerospace industry is. We have governmental aerospace support, defense support, commercial support. In the central part of the state where the majority of these yellow dots are located, the Oklahoma City metro area, that supply chain is mostly geared towards handling DoD work, Department of Defense or governmental agencies. Up here in the northeast quadrant in the Tulsa metro service area, most of the supply chain there is geared towards handling commercial work, air carrier service or freight service. We have numerous providers of structural repair, engine repair, research and development. The list goes on and on. Many highly qualified providers of supply chain for maintenance, repair, and overhaul, as well as original equipment manufacturing here in the state. This slide right here depicts our aerospace and defense infrastructure assets. So part of the reason that the state is so diverse is because of our two, what I'd like to call leviathans or our giants within the state. We have the American Airlines maintenance base up in Tulsa. That's the largest single site commercial MRO facility in the world. And then down here in Oklahoma City, we have Tinker Air Force Base. It's a United States Air Force Base. It's the largest MRO facility in the world, period. The building on that base that handles the majority of the engine work is 1.5 miles long. It's a staggeringly large building. The capabilities of that facility are ridiculous in terms of frontline maintenance, back shop maintenance, and then support or services maintenance that goes along with it. In addition to Tinker Air Force Base here in Oklahoma City, we have the FAA Mike Monroney Aeronautical Center. The Monroney Aeronautical Center is very unique. It's the largest single site FAA center. It also houses a couple of resident commands, I like to say, or resident support services that are geared towards handling logistics, flight safety, airman certification, physiology, flight testing. It's a very, very interesting and very large support facility structure for the FAA. We have a rather large military presence across the state. Obviously, Tinker Air Force Base being the largest base, but we also have 2 training bases, one north of us in Enid, Vance Air Force Base, and then another one down in the southwest corner of Oklahoma, Altus Air Force Base. We have McAllister Army Ammunition Base down in the southeast corner over here, if you guys can see where I'm at, this little star right here. And they manufacture and store somewhere in the neighborhood of 70+% of all the munitions dropped by the US and allied partners, DoD partners. One of our most unique and prized assets across the state, however, is this one right out here. I don't know if you guys can see where I'm circling right there, but that is the Oklahoma Air and Spaceport. There are 12 of those across the United States. Ours is unique in the fact that it is the only one that has a launch corridor from the surface to space, 150 miles long by 50 miles wide. It is pointed almost directly straight north, so it gives you access to polar orbit. Polar orbit is very valuable to space satellites assets. That airspace that launch corridor sits in is not controlled by commercial or military training areas. To turn that launch corridor on, the director of OSIDA, the Oklahoma Space Industry Development Authority, merely needs to call the Fort Worth Center and tell them that he is going to launch, and they will shut the airspace down and nobody can get in or out. What's also unique about that spaceport is that we've recently received approval from the FAA to test unmanned vehicles out there. Now, it is on a case-by-case basis right now. We are working to put some infrastructure out there that would allow us to fly autonomously, or the term is beyond visual line of sight. That will require some surveillance radars, and we're actively working to get those placed out there. In addition, in the central part of the state, in the Oklahoma service area, we also have the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association National Severe Storms Laboratory, NOAA, and the National Weather Service. They're all located here in Oklahoma City. If any of you have ever seen that movie Twister and you see the National Weather Service issue tornado warnings, those come out of Oklahoma City. The reason they're here is because they have a partnership with OU and the Radar Research Center at OU as well. I'll get into that a little bit more in just a minute. I'm going to talk about unmanned system support for a second, and I'll explain why in just a few minutes. It's an integral part of our strategy to grow the aerospace and defense sector in the state of Oklahoma. We have two very, very valuable assets associated with academic institutions here within the state. The first, probably the premier asset that is located here within the state in terms of unmanned systems is the USRI, or the Unmanned Systems Research Institute. It is piloted by piloted by Dr. Jamie Jacobs, who is a national icon in terms of unmanned systems research. They were the first to ever fly an unmanned fixed-wing aircraft swarm within the national airspace, which is a massive deal. He does a lot of research in terms of developing autonomy, unmanned systems, and how those unmanned systems interact with the mission and each other unmanned systems. What is little known about the USRI, though, is there is also a very healthy hybrid propulsion program, research program there as well. It's headed by another gentleman named Dr. Kurt Rouser, and they are making some very cutting-edge technology research in hydrogen propulsion, electric, and conventional hybrid propulsion. Those work hand in hand, I would like to say hand in glove with one another, and they're very valuable assets, especially when you're in consideration with advanced tech startups for unmanned and autonomous systems. The other crowning asset we have is that picture in the bottom center. It's the Advanced Radar Research Center. It's located at the University of Oklahoma. The ARC is a cutting-edge research institute in terms of Doppler radar, weather radar, and they work hand in hand with unmanned systems as well. Whether it's researching new radars for weather aloft, or unmanned systems to fly, or whether it's onboard unmanned systems, scaling down radar systems to be deployed on unmanned or autonomous vehicles. We also have what used to be the FAA IPP test range down at the Choctaw Nation. It's a 44,000 acre test facility. It's affectionately known as the Daisy Ranch. It is also capable of beyond visual line of sight for autonomous and unmanned systems. Okay, that was a mouthful. Rest for a second. So, as I stated, my organization is a legislatively mandated and established and funded organization. Our primary goal is to grow the aerospace industry. Over the last year, we just closed out 2020. Over the last year, we've managed to make some wins, some decent strides in the growth of Oklahoma's aerospace and defense. We are still very hungry and very, very hard at work, recruiting many companies to come to the state. Just a second, I'll dive a little bit deeper into what we're targeting and who we would love to come and start trade with. One of the advantages my team is capable of is aligning commercial operators, commercial providers with Department of Defense opportunities. That's something that we live and breathe every day. Obviously, Tinker Air Force Base here in the middle of Oklahoma, they have many programmatic activities there and are capable of awarding supply contracts and are all constantly looking for suppliers to help feed their mission needs. This is the aerospace and defense strategy for the state of Oklahoma. It's just recently released, actually last week as a matter of fact. Now I'm not going to read the slide to you line by line, but the four main tenets are this. We must continue to grow our workforce by providing programs, whether they're four-year degree programs or technical programs that actively meet the needs of advanced technology and the pioneering direction in which the aerospace and defense industry is rolling. We are also in the midst of creating an environment for advanced technologies that can plant here, grow here, and blossom here. What we are seeking are advanced technology companies that are interwoven and connected to one another and can support one another. I speak of these as meaning directly additive technologies, advanced battery tech, electric propulsion, hybrid propulsion, commercial space, and obviously unmanned systems. How we're going to get that done is by developing, and we're in the process of doing this now, an innovation cluster, one that's led by the academic entities within the state. We have three major universities here: Oklahoma State University, my alma mater, the University of Oklahoma, of which I previously spoke, and then the University of Tulsa. All three of them have staggering research programs in different areas supporting aerospace and defense, and provide great opportunities for growth of advanced technology companies for startup and beyond. And then lastly, the thing we desire most is to establish an engine sustainment enterprise that would be considered a center of excellence. Tinker Air Force Base overhauls just about every power plant that the U.S. Department of Defense employs. They are consistently looking for providers to handle some things that either they have not the bandwidth to handle or the capability to handle, which is admittedly very little. Tinker can handle a lot. But there's a lot of reverse engineering work that needs to be sourced, and they consistently look for providers. We seek to recruit those providers to the state of Oklahoma, get them married to public opportunities, and give them an environment with which to grow and be successful. Again, back to the university-led innovation cluster I spoke of. It's a symbiotic triangle between academia, public entities, and private entities. This is what we seek to establish. In order to make our industry successful in the state, we must streamline and have a clearly defined path to streamline tech transfer. We believe that if we have these amazing research programs, and we have public opportunities that we can identify and marry to those research programs, we simply seek to find the last leg of that triangle, which is a commercial provider that can help fill that need. Those are the companies that we seek to recruit and grow in Oklahoma or trade with in Oklahoma. Again, these are some of the subsector technologies that I speak of: additive technologies, 3D printing, advanced printing, battery technology, advanced battery technology, electric propulsion, commercial space, and obviously unmanned systems. We have a couple of these companies already in place in Oklahoma that would be great trade partners. Infinite Composite Technology is a very cutting edge company. They have seamless, linerless, flangeless composite tanks. It's a very elegant solution for high pressure vessels that are currently flying on the space station and other launch vehicles at this point. They're also so structurally sound that they can store hydrogen as well. So they have a play as well for getting after hydrogen storage for hybrid propulsion. We just recently recruited Skydweller Aero to the state of Oklahoma. Skydweller is a high altitude, long endurance aircraft. It flies above the clouds. It is a pseudo satellite for all intents and purposes. It's solar charged, electric battery operated with 1,100 pound payload. It is a very unique vehicle and has a very unique mission. They need support as well. Specifically, I would like to look to see if there are companies out there that can advanced battery companies to feed the need for electrification of flight, hybrid propulsion, and obviously electric autonomous vehicles. In terms of what the state can do to recruit companies and instigate trade as well, we have many incentives that we offer for aerospace and defense. Our number one incentive that we offer to companies that would locate here is our Quality Jobs program. I won't bore you with the details, but I will say this: it is a quarterly payment schedule. A cashback payment is based on jobs, the number of jobs you bring to the state of Oklahoma, and the wages that they make. There are three variations of this program, and is by far the most popular incentive that we have. Right behind that, we have our engineer workforce tax credit programs. This is available to any engineer that works in the aerospace industry or supporting industry. This can be stacked with the Quality Jobs incentive as well. Long story short, up to the employer can take up to 10% of the wages paid by, 10% of the wages paid to the employee for the first 5 years, a maximum of $12,500 if they're an in-state graduate. If they are an out-of-state graduate, again, 5% up to 12.5%, and then the engineers themselves get a tax credit as well. This is beneficial. That gives them the opportunity to gain a higher wage that they might see on the East or West Coast and enjoy that benefit here in the state. We also have 5-year tax exemption, property ad valorem exemptions. And one of the most unique incentives that the state also allows is for aerospace and defense companies, they never pay sales tax ever, period, stop. We're also employing some new legislation that's going through cycle at this point. Right now, during this legislative session, these legislative pieces seek to incentivize venture capital to bring them to Oklahoma and help us along our way in building that triangle, that symbiotic relationship of an innovation cluster. So that is Oklahoma in a nutshell. And I look forward to any questions that you may have after everybody's done. So I think at this point, I will hand it back to John.
That's great, Jeff. Thank you. That was a really informative presentation. I'm so glad we're recording it, as there's lots of fantastic information in there. And just as Jeff said, yes, please do use the chat bar function for any questions you might have. Our next guest speaker, Alan Fisher, has over 35 years management experience operating at a global level in commercial, financial, business development and strategic planning in the aerospace and defence sector. Alan has held several senior leadership positions with tier 1 companies such as Collins Aerospace, now Raytheon Technologies, Ultra Electronics, Cleverham, Pattern and ADS, the UK's National Trade Association for Aerospace, Defence and Security. Alan now works for the Department for International Trade as an aerospace specialist, identifying and delivering significant export and investment opportunities. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you, John. Good morning, everybody. Let me just put up my if I can find it. And there it is. Okay, hopefully you can all see that now. What I plan to do over the next 15 minutes is just really run through the UK aerospace and space setup in Europe, and focusing really on the strength of the supply chain, some of the innovation that is actually going on in the UK and its effect going forward, where the funding is available, looking at what's happening with the advanced air mobility. And I thought it was interesting when in Jeff's presentation about battery technology and electrification, because that's quite key when you start looking at advanced air mobility. And also one of the things that we're doing in the UK now, which is called Women in Aerospace and Aviation, where we are trying to balance the demographic within aerospace to reflect the actual country's demographic. So we're trying to make sure that we recruit women engineers, we entice women engineers, we encourage them to join, and we have sufficient women engineers in a senior role in aerospace, which I think is quite important. I mean, quite often they call aerospace boards pale and stale and grey. Well, we're trying to change that in the UK, and there's an activity called Women in Aviation, and I'll talk to that in a bit. But I just thought I'd actually tell you, it's quite an important day today in aerospace history, because today is when Bill Boeing and Eddie Hubbard delivered the first airmail delivery from Seattle to Vancouver. And on the back of that, Eddie Hubbard convinced Bill Boeing to start a regular service from British Columbia to Seattle, which made Boeing then compete with the Chicago-San Francisco route, which is the seed of how Boeing became one of the largest air transport manufacturers and suppliers in the world. So that all happened today, quite a long time ago, March 1919. But I thought that would be quite interesting for you to see that. The aerospace industry itself, this is just a one-page snapshot. It is, can I just say, pre-COVID. So there are some changes to that which will happen in due course. But at the moment, it's about a 34 billion pound, or a 45 billion dollar export industry. Over 90% of what the UK manufactures and designs is exported. It's one of the higher growth areas, or was one of the highest growth areas, and it's one of the highest earnings in the industries around. And it was quite a complex and detailed supply chain, which, if you think how that covers both manufacture, the services side of it, the infrastructure that supports aerospace. And overall, we have a substantial amount of research and development, part funded by the government and part funded by industry itself. It's a match funded initiative, and I'll come on to that in a bit later. We have a large number of academia, in the UK, but we have specifically, if you look at the UK, and I know I checked before this, Oklahoma is actually smaller than the UK, which is a relief, because normally when I do these presentations, the UK is actually smaller than the state or the country I'm talking to. But as you can see, it's spread right around the UK. There's no specific meat of them, other than possibly if you look at the Southeast and the Midlands, which is not a surprise because that's primarily the Rolls-Royces. These are the major suppliers now in the UK. And interestingly, there are very few of those that are actually not foreign owned. But you can see all the major players are there. We've got Airbus, we've got Boeing, General Dynamics, Rolls-Royce, Safran, Northrop Grumman, GE Aviation, and now Raytheon, who have acquired UTC and Collins. Major systems that we focus on in the UK tends to be around structures, propulsion, landing gear and systems, with obviously concerns around interiors, the aftermarket and helicopters, with our Leonardo, our Italian company Leonardo, down on the southwest of the UK. The key thing about, I think, the industry in the UK is we actually have a very coherent industry strategy for aerospace between the government and the industry. It's one of the first I've heard. It's a 1.95 billion pounds by industry and a 1.9 billion pounds by the government over the period up until 2026. And for those that know the political landscape in the UK and how governments change, that goes across, or will go across, a parliamentary change. Now, whether it stays Conservative or goes to Labour or whatever, that's in the lap of the gods and the lap of the public. But the key thing there is it is not specific to one particular parliamentary time. So, and that's quite important, because that enables companies to invest longer term and, supported by government, go through the longer terms. The whole of the AGP, the Aerospace Growth Partnership, is managed by the Aerospace Technology Institute, and I'll touch on that in a second. but also it focuses on what is the aerospace government strategy, and the government has published a 10-point plan, and one of which is clean air or clean aviation, which is the Jet Zero initiative, which Boris Johnson has published recently. We also look at skills. One of the key things we've got to do is we need to maintain skills, and it was good to see in the Oklahoma pitch the activities with academia working closely with industry and with the state to maintain a skill level. And then the other side of it is the supply chain competitiveness. And it's not just the competitive, it's also its fragility. We need to make sure that we support the UK supply chain, or the global supply chain, in fact, because as we come out of COVID, it's going to prove a very difficult time for companies as they roll out of the COVID situation where we've been in the last 18 months. And the last area we look at is the engagement, to make sure that we are publishing, we are making industry aware, we're making governments aware, and we are working closely with our international partners to ensure that we deliver the technology that is going to drive us forward. So it's quite clear on that. We have a number of what we call catapults, which are basically centres of excellence spread across all of the various innovative activities, from offshore renewals to high value manufacturing to precision medicines, smart cities, etc. And that's something that's used, and that is usually funded by a combination of the government and also industry joining the initiatives with sponsorships, etc. And that enables us then to test the technology that gets delivered through what the ATI delivers. That's all supported by the academic setup in the UK. We have what we believe is a network of world-leading universities, and I won't dwell on these, but some of you will probably know a lot of these universities, all involved in technology R&D, with all of the major technologies around both aerospace, automotive, marine, IT, etc. Medicinal, etc. So it's a large set network of universities. The ATI, the Aerospace Technology Institute, was spun out of the Aerospace Growth Partnership. It's an independent institute. It's funded by the UK government jointly, which, as I said earlier, is the 1.95 each funding for R&T. The key initiative here is it has to look towards the four major themes that the UK aerospace and government have identified as where we want to be, and that is obviously the aircraft of the future, whether that's a hydrogen-powered aircraft or hydrogen-fueled aircraft, and the hydrogen cell-powered aircraft, whether it's got elements of electrification in it. What's the structure of the future going to be? Are we talking about laminar flow wings? Are we talking about composites? How are we going to develop those? Clearly, propulsion of the future. We work closely. I know Siemens, for example, are working closely on electric motors to drive aircraft. How do we get to the point where the propulsion system in our aircraft is more environmentally friendly from a noise point of view, and from a cleanliness point of view? And obviously, there's the fourth element is smart, connected, and more electric aircraft. We need to become a lot smarter in how we develop it, and this is where the autonomous air vehicles come in. And it's I'll reference that in a few minutes. What we also do, we recognise that if you look at the ATI, a lot of that is directed at the tier ones and the primes. One of the problems you have with technology, there's a lot of smaller suppliers that are very agile, very innovative, but because they're small, the profit or the cost of the R&D will come out of the profit, which means that they'll tend to make that a longer time frame than it really should be to make them more competitive. So the government with industry developed the NATEP, which is the National Aerospace Technology Exploitation Program, which is targeting specifically the supply chain, small SMEs, and it's helping them to fund their innovative activities over an 18-month period, so they become far more competitive, far more innovative in a quicker time period without impacting their profit and therefore the survivability, and that's working extremely well in our industry. So very well being leaders in technology, we need to be highly more productive, and we need to be more efficient and more competitive. And we have two initiatives. The first one is sharing in growth. This is initiative, which is all about performance improvement. It is a team of specialists that come in and they will review your processes in your company. They will look at the technology you're using, they'll look at your skills, your capability, your finance, and they will shred all of that apart and drill right down to the root cause, then rebuild it up. And it makes companies far more competitive. It's a very painful process, I have to say, from experience. Some of the things you hear you don't want to hear, but it works. And if you get through it, you actually are far more competitive and far more productive. But that's good. That's for companies that have the infrastructure in their organizations to support that. It's not easy if you're a small company. So what the government did was they developed a thing called SC21. And again, this is specifically for SMEs and smaller companies. It's about looking at your processes again, and it's about developing methods and supporting it down the lean road, etc. And looking at how we can make companies more competitive. It's not an accreditation as such, although it is recognized within the industry as a standard, not necessarily for you to lose business because you don't have it, but it's recognized that if you are an SC21 bronze, silver or gold, which is dependent on the performance, then you are a certain level of supplier. Therefore, companies tend to like to do business with companies that they understand and recognize how good they are. So, and that again is purely down the supply chain. I mentioned Women in Aviation Aerospace. It was launched back in 2018 at Farnborough by a number of UK companies and the government. And it was trying to get gender balance across the industry for both women and men in the sector. And it's a commitment of the organisation to support the progression of women into senior roles. If we look at the UK, and I'm sure it's the same in the US, if you look at the UK industry and you look at the seniors, there are not that many women in extremely senior roles or in senior roles generally. So the idea here is to look at how we can develop a charter signed by various companies that they will support and recognise diversity and push the balance of male and female, as well as ethnicity across the whole of the industry. And it's something that the DIT have Department of International Trade has signed for. And if you want to know more, the lady is Tiffany Perry. She works in the aerospace team, and she is the champion for that within the DIT. Going forward, if we look at the future of mobility, if we look at it from two sorts of ways, one is incrementally, then you have like more electric aircraft, you have the electric content increasing, electrical technologies actually enhancing. We now have electric brakes, we have excuse me, the infrastructure within an aircraft through power distribution, power generation. But then if you look further and you say, well, what's disruptively doing it? What, doing more of what we do and tweaking isn't going to get us to where we need to be as far as Jet Zero is concerned. So we need to look at how we change our whole concept. And so if we look at the current technology limitations we have, and if we start from the left, we have, for personal air transport, 200 nautical miles, moving through the small regionals up to narrow bodies to the wide bodies and up to, going from 200 nautical miles to 4,000 nautical miles. And you see the next stage is how you're, rather than use avgas by regular aviation fuel, how can you change and make the aircraft more clean? We can go through all electric. That doesn't go much further than the small regional for reasons of power distribution and battery limitations. But it gives us an opportunity to have clean, small, maybe 15-seat aircraft. Then you start moving at hybrid electrical, moving up the further one, and then finally you move to the more electrics to the wide bodies of the right-hand side. So it's timelined to the right, and there are some pictorial examples of it. But the key thing here is we move down the more electric, which is onboard electric, and then we start looking at what fuel will be used, and we'll move them from electric to hybrid electric. We'll move to sustainable aviation fuels, which gets us part way to clean air, and then ultimately to either hydrogen fuel or hydrogen fuel cells. And both of those are probably in the 2030 plus time frame. I would imagine we could be flying now by about 2030 sustainable aviation fuel on our narrow bodies and possibly the large wide bodies. So what we did in the UK as part of the industry, we said, well, how do we address the Future Flight Challenge? So we set up a Future Flight Challenge within the industry, which again is funded. So companies like Zero Avia have actually been part of this, which I know was referenced earlier, and they've been very successful working with Cranfield University, and they're about to set up in Gloucester Airport their facility to develop further and to build more flight test aircraft. But it's looking at the whole future flight. So it's not about the platform. It's not about whether it's the aircraft itself. It's all the bits that go around it. It's the infrastructure and the ecosystem. So it's, how do you manage the airspace? If you have autonomous air vehicles, how do you manage the airspace? It's not going to be the same as trying to do it with air traffic control as we know it today. Are they going to use swarm technology, for example, to make it far more efficient? Because if you look, I mean, we all look at the international airports, and we can see aircraft coming in, and they're 1,000 feet apart, a mile apart, and they're just on stack. Well, if we went for drone technology, we could start linking the aircraft together. I mean that geographically, not literally. So they work as a swarm coming through. So we could actually find we could get far more efficient utilization of airspace, which means we'd have less aircraft hovering around cities, and they'll be coming straight into the airfield. So there's looking at those sort of technologies as well as just the platform. Then obviously the infrastructure. If you start looking at electrical vehicles, how do you generate sufficient electricity to charge these aircraft when they land? Secondly, if you start looking at hydrogen fueled aircraft, where are you going to store the hydrogen on an airfield? How are you going to store it on an airfield? How are you going to ship the hydrogen to the airfield, for example, and all things like that? Because then all of a sudden you've got this very clean aerospace technology, but a very dirty automotive technology as it ships it on trucks and things. So, and it's looking at that, and then also it's looking at, well, how do we look at what sorts of things? Can we go to air taxis? How about unmanned air taxis? I mean, we've all watched, I think, some of the innovative ideas going forward. But how do you do that? You need to make sure that the operating models satisfy the commercial operations. And so, what the Flight Challenge does is address all of those issues. And it's and it doesn't just talk to aircraft manufacturers, or the DIT or anybody else. It's also talking to the Department for Transport, because clearly you look at taxis, etc. It's talking to the policy people, the local and city authorities. It's talking to the CAA, as how do you certify some of these vehicles past flight test certification when you're actually going to put passengers in there, and things like that. So all of that is part of the challenge, and that's being addressed now in the UK. And I would commend if you get the chance, is actually look at the Future Flight Challenge work streams, which are on the website. And then if we look at where the post-COVID view is of the industry, where we think things are going to happen. So if you look at the left-hand side, the vertical there it says battery, then it goes up to hydrogen, and then you've got sustainable fuels coming down. That's because as hydrogen is implemented, sustainable fuel requirement reduces. So that's why that one's going down, that's why it's going up. And then you look at the time frame up to 2040, and then you can see going from urban air mobility, which is and goods, unmanned air systems, the Amazon drones, etc. And then you move to sub-regional business jets, and you can see going up the sizes as you do that. And then you move to the right, and you can see some of the ideas where the industry is directing its technology. And you can see, if you look at the wide body and the narrow body, there's two substantial gaps between where, if you look at the narrow body, where we are currently in with the Chinese C919 and the extra long range A321 Airbus, to the Airbus 0E, which is the zero emissions aircraft. There's a gap there, which ideally could be filled with an alternate platform. And the same with the wide body. If you move slightly to the right, we've got the CR929, the Boeing 777-9. And then you've got this gap before we get to the new long-range aircraft. So all of these have been evolved, and all of them are looking at how do we get to our sustainable target by 2050. So, I mean, this is the last, it's not the last slide, but this is a good idea of the innovation landscape. How do we do it? So in the UK, we have a number of things. We have the ATI programs, which is the lilac-y colour, which is looking at air transport technologies, larger aircraft evolving rapidly. How do we develop UK competitiveness, increasing the sustainability, etc., etc. So all of those is looking at going from wide body down to the large UAVs. You have the Future Flight Challenge, which is looking at how do we integrate the aviation systems. How can we focus, or should we focus on smaller and novel vehicles and drones to get air mobility to sub-regional levels? How do we focus on zero carbon, the clean growth and future transport, and delivering basically broad-based consortia across the industry? So they're kind of like the innovation landscape and the aviation innovation landscape. And across the bottom, you can see there's the aircraft, the physicalities, the control and configuration, the flight ops, what the business. So all of these are being addressed in the Future Flight Challenge and in the ATI, because it's not a simple equation at the moment. If we look at the future of flight, especially the future of flight post-COVID, how are we as passengers and how we as businesses going to conduct our business and conduct our travels going forward? So a lot of things are being addressed here. Quick summary. I mean, this is just a snapshot, and it's one of those slides I always think is quite nice just to almost to have in your pocket, because it is a good example and a good aid memoir of where the UK aerospace sits. We pioneer growth and innovation. I think I've shown you that, I hope. We are delivering some key grand challenges as fast as we can within level. The industry is looking at innovation. We've got it's got the Bombardier C series and the composite wings. That's obviously the Airbus 220. We've got the hybrid air vehicles. We've got lighter than air vehicles in Highlander, Airlander rather. Productivity growth is 20% higher than our other European partners, or not so much partners now. We've created single crystal turbine blades with Rolls-Royce, so we're at the forefront of those. And then we now, with a number of things we're doing in the UK, we like to think of ourselves as a world leader in electric and autonomous aircraft. We have Zero AV, we have a number of aircraft from the US looking in the UK to continue development. Companies like Ampere, Joby Aviation, Bliss Aerospace. And then obviously nearly 90% of our aerospace turnover, as I said right at the start, is actually exported, which really does reinforce the UK's trade position. And then obviously in aerospace technology, I mentioned the engine side of things, but also you've got the Airbus wings and going forward. So it's a good place to be. I think we are well positioned to ride out the COVID situation, and really that's all I was going to say. I know I apologise. I did canter through that a bit fast. If there are any questions when we get to Q&A, feel free to ask them if I wasn't clear on what I was saying. So thank you for listening.
That's great, Alan. Thank you ever so much for that very detailed presentation there. Lots of great information. I think it's probably just worth us mentioning, because I'm conscious of time and we are coming up to the end. Within the registration link, there is an email address for my colleague, Sarah Banks. What I would suggest is if anyone has got any questions for either of the speakers, myself, Sarah, or any of the people in the audience, then please drop Sarah an email and we will get back to you as soon as possible. I believe there may be a couple of questions in the chat bar, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to wrap up here and encourage everybody to drop us an email if you do have any questions. Just to reiterate, we're based actually in our Houston office, and we're here to support US companies that are looking at the UK as a destination to export, grow and expand, and also UK companies looking at the US market. So please do get in touch with Sarah if you need any further information. But I would really like to just say a big thank you to Alan, Jeff and Kunal for your presentations. Lots of great information there, and we will be following up with everybody after this call. So thank you all. Thank you for your time. Thank you to Alicia as well from the Oklahoma's Commerce Aerospace Division for helping set this up. And we will be in touch. And thank you ever so much.